Hello, and welcome to Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. We are here for a social event with Alyssa Harley, who is our subject matter expert on community engagement in clean transportation, a topic I don't know that much about, and so I'm very interested in learning all about it from her. As we all trickle in, I just want to invite you all to come off mute and just say hi, just so we have some kind of humanity here in our weird virtual world. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. I'm Caroline Trowbridge. I am the events chair here at Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, and I am honored to be your moderator today. So if you wouldn't mind moving us to the next slide. We have a packed hour-long agenda here. We don't want to misuse any of your time, and we know that you all have many other places that you can be today on a beautiful June evening. So to start out, we are going to just run through some housekeeping things, and then I will quickly pass the baton to Alyssa, who you're really here to hear from. Then we will have 2 breakout room sessions where you'll have an opportunity to network and dig into the topics that you've learned from the speaker. We'll come back and regroup as a group and break out into a second session, come together a final time, and then wrap up. So it'll go by quickly, and I welcome you all to be as present as possible. Next slide. So if you're new to Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, we are celebrating 10 years, which is a pretty big achievement for a nonprofit that's almost entirely run by volunteers. It's very much a labor of love. We have on our call here the Vice Chairwoman, Sarah Fuentes, who is very much accredited for keeping this organization growing and thriving. We have monthly events, which you have clearly found because you've attended this event. But we also are starting to expand our virtual and in-person events. So stay tuned for those, especially if you're in Los Angeles in the Bay Area. That's kind of where it's going to begin in person, but we are expanding beyond California. We also have a mentorship program for members. And I actually personally participated in that and had a very life-changing experience where I have been in touch with my mentor for years now, ever since I met her through that program. And then in October, we have our flagship event. It's a TED Talk style of conference where everyone gathers together, and especially coming out of 2 years of virtual, I think that one's going to be particularly special. So mark your calendar. Next slide. We have a scholarship program, which I really want to highlight on this call because this is a way for WCS to expand our network and make our membership more affordable for people who may need it. And so I am excited to announce that we have more openings. If you happen to know anyone who would benefit from this scholarship, please encourage them to apply. We are looking to fill that cohort as soon as possible. Next slide. So some other upcoming events. In just a week, we have our pitch competition, which is pretty cool. I think WCS has the claim to fame of having the first female clean tech pitch competition. And it's awesome. It's going to be virtual. So if you're not in the Bay Area, no problem. And we're all really looking forward to that one. We also have a grid resiliency and wildfires panel in July, and the LA chapter has a book club on the book Donut Economics. So start reading now, or if you're a fast reader, you can start a little later, but I'm a very slow reader. Next slide. Some Zoom etiquette. I'm sure everyone knows the spiel. Gotta say it though, please be respectful of our speaker and your other audience attendees. If you want to get as much as you possibly can out of this event, I highly recommend you write your full name, you share your video, you put your LinkedIn in the chat, and you encourage people to reach out to you, and you reach out to them too, because the more you put out into the world, the more you get, as everyone knows. And so this is an opportunity to make connections. Next slide. If you aren't a member and you're interested in it, go to this QR code and we actually will reimburse you for this event tonight if that's of interest to you. Many benefits of being a WCS member. Happy to chat about them if you want to reach out to me. Next slide. So who am I, this talking head at you? I'm Caroline Trowbridge. I am, as I said, the WCS events chair, but I also work in project finance at Leeward Renewable Energy, doing utility scale solar storage and wind projects. And I'm here to introduce to you, next slide, our co-host, Circuit, that is the company where Alyssa Harley is hailing from, in which they are experts in connecting transit to the communities and reducing congestion and the harmful impacts of the extensive chaos of public transportation. So very interested to hear about what they're up to. Next slide. And here's Alyssa, the Director of Transit Development herself. Alyssa, take it away from here.
Thank you, guys. My name is Alyssa Harley with Circuit Transit. We focus on the first last mile in transportation, bridging gaps between transit, food, community, jobs, education, anything that can be located within a small community. We're not going to take you, all the way to the airport or as far as Uber and Lyft, but it's really focusing on short distance trips and bridging those gaps using all electric transportation. We have our entire fleet is owned and operated by Circuit trained staff. We hire all of our drivers locally, and we really work with cities and communities to build and design these transportation programs. So I'm just going to share some of my experience with the community engagement that we've done with Circuit as part of grant programs in California and New York. Next slide. So this is just slide before, sorry. Okay, so who am I? I have a background in international development, humanities, and startup ecosystem research. So I specialize in how technology can really help communities. And I've done that across a bunch of different industry areas. And I've been in transportation since 2019. Before Circuit, I was at the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, working across clean tech projects and government relations. Recent experience has been with Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator's Zero Emissions Mobility Program, where we worked with the community of Lamar Park to, for the first time, we were using community-led design as a concept, where instead of looking at the community and saying, let's do this, and then start a program, based on just our analysis, we had a panel of community members that the LA Clean Tech Incubator put together for us. And we heard from them what their specific challenges were about short distance transportation in this community, who the community was, and what they thought the challenges would be, and designing the program around what they expressed their challenges to be. These community partners were made up of small businesses, small nonprofits, and community stakeholders in the area. Following that, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, put out a grant program called the Clean Mobility Options, where cities and communities could submit applications with mobility providers such as Circuit to win up to $1 million in funding. It required a community needs assessment. The community already had to have an idea of what its transportation challenges were and how this solution that they were proposing matched together with it. There is another round of Clean Mobility Options funding that is expected to come out this fall. So if there's any communities in California that are disadvantaged communities, I would encourage you to let them know about this program. They could start preparing, see if they have a community needs assessment already, and if not, to start working on that, because that is primarily the eligibility to apply for this program. We applied with, worked with 3 communities to apply for that program, all 3 of which were awarded. This was Lamert Park to continue on this initial pilot program with the LA Clean Tech Incubator, the City of National City, and the City of Chula Vista. We also, building on this ongoing experience and refining how I was doing community engagement, we were awarded a phase 1 grant with the New York State NYSERDA program, which is essentially where their carbon credits and clean energy programs their grants are focused on. And there was a new one that came out called a Clean Transportation Fund, where mobility solutions could submit. There were 3 different categories. We chose electric mobility, but there was also clean neighborhoods and an electric freight, zero emissions freight program. We were awarded a phase 1 grant that also provided funding to the community partners that we had selected to help them assess what the community needed with us. So it was actually one of the few programs where there was funding available to the community partners to participate in this process, which I think is really important. Next slide. So I think what's helpful to keep in mind is that in whatever technology you have, whatever the transportation option is, it's helpful to know what the landscape is. This problem and your solution doesn't exist in a vacuum. And what we found through working with a lot of community partners is that it can be a city, but it can also be a nonprofit. And it's not just up to you to completely rely on that city or that community partner to know the ecosystem of their problems or their challenges or these opportunities, but to research what else is there and who else is doing something in this field. If it's public transportation, then it's not just understanding what is the physical infrastructure that's in place, what is the physical infrastructure that's coming into place, but also knowing what other options people have. So you really starting to look at a problem focused or a mission focused solution, then you really need to understand this. I sort of developed this. You can look at it in terms of a concept-based view. This is from when I was looking at startup ecosystems during my research, but it applies here too. Anything that you're doing that's impact focused or mission focused, really need to look at. So there's the entrepreneur, the technology in the middle, and the technology can be, it can be software or hardware based. It could just be whatever the solution is. It could be a newsletter. It could be whatever you are forming your idea around what your company is focused on doing. That's the middle. Everything around it are concepts that are part of that ecosystem. So it could be within that industry, it could be more expansive. On the right is, there's an actor-based approach. So there are the startups in the middle, the ideas. It doesn't have to be a startup in this case, but a technology. There's larger industry or other industry. There's universities, there's society. There's a lot of different actors in this space. And it's not just the user and the technology. If we go to the next slide. This is a tool that I found really helpful when you're talking about moving with impact and doing business for good. We've probably all heard of a business model canvas where you're trying to figure out how to develop your business model. This one has really been aligned specifically for government relations through Stanford in this case, but this one's really focused on a mission model, how a mission might not have a customer, someone who's paying, but it has a beneficiary. Who's going to benefit from the solution? Who's going to use the solution? And sort of reframing a business model to focus around, a mission, achieving something, impact. So this helps you frame what are these different channels to achieve this mission, and to get to the very nugget of this is, what is the problem? And you really have to with governments, they always sort of have their mission. That's a policy decision usually, or a regulatory decision, such as California is going to reach X percentage of clean energy production by 2030. That's a mission. Those are usually pretty easy to find. But what is the problem? What is the problem that you're solving? And when you're thinking about that in terms of a community, this wouldn't be, you know, as broad as everyone in Los Angeles prefers to drive their own car. When you're thinking about this in terms of a local community, such as Lamert Park, it is what you have to look at what ways people are getting around. And in this case, physically, it helps to physically go to the community and physically meet with people. During the pandemic, that was very difficult. And so I was designing this program having never set foot in this community and only talking to people over Zoom. As soon as I got to the community, and unfortunately, after I'd already designed the program based on that, I realized that the problem wasn't necessarily that, not just that on a basis, people have difficulty getting to local trips. They don't have easy access to food. They don't have easy access to transit, and they don't have easy access to opportunity, for example, those three things. When you get to the community and you see the population and you drive in the area, what you realize is there are quite a few people walking to all of their errands because they don't have any other options. So you see a senior with a push cart with all of their groceries in it, walking multiple miles because they don't have another way. And they might not go to the grocery store as often. They might not go to healthcare appointments. They might only do 1 or 2 errands a day because they're walking. That reframes the problem. The problem is not that, not just that they don't have access to it, or sort of reframes it. The problem isn't that they need to use the bus, they need to use public transit. The problem is that they can't use the bus to do those things. They can't use a rail system to do those things because a bus and rail in Los Angeles is focused around a commute. It's focused on peak trips in the morning and the afternoon. And in this case, seniors primarily travel in the morning and in the afternoon when there is not traffic. And they might do it, specifically if they're walking, when it's light out. If you have a transportation solution that is free or very affordable, that they can request on demand and go anywhere for these local trips, suddenly they can bridge together multiple trips. They can go to the bank, Social Security office, get their groceries, and do all of these trips in one day rather than walk on their own with a push cart several days a week. This mission model can help you hone in on what are these different pieces here. And there's another tool here. Next slide. This is called a logic model, and this isn't specifically what is the problem, but how do you measure if you're achieving towards that problem. So you can use these different pieces and you can expand upon this. It's very simplified. This was provided through the New York program as an example. But once you get to what the outcomes and impact are and sort of hone in on that, you really will figure out what do you actually need to measure in order to see if you're achieving that mission. And logic models can help you figure this out. If you're using your solution to solve a new type of challenge or in a new area, you might not have the exact measurement of what you need to solve for. For example, we thought that the metric for Lamert Park would be, what is the number of elderly people using the service? And what percentage of the users do those elderly population make up? I was looking in the data and I figured out I had accidentally set the settings wrong. I made it the percentage of the overall requests and what volume of requests were coming from elderly. What I found out is that that is actually a more significant statistic than the other one we were measuring, because the number of seniors might have been small, but they were requesting 60% of the trips. So you go from 10% of a user population making 60% of the trips. These are super users, and these are who you should be focusing your solution on. Those are who you can engage with and figure out what do they like about the service, what is difficult to use about the service for them. You could get and focus on those problems a little bit more. But we were measuring the wrong thing. We were measuring the right thing globally in terms of how are elderly using the service, but the specific metric, you can leave yourself some flexibility to figure out what that metric is that is most meaningful. Next slide. So I gave some examples of them at Park. We did have the opportunity to get additional funding to extend this program. And based on what we saw in the data and what we were measuring, we decided to make it to add more cars to increase the zone, because the scope originally, and it was based on the budget, was not easy to understand where you could go. The solution itself, easy to use. You request a ride, download the app, request a ride, works similar to an Uber or Lyft app. It's free. You can go anywhere. These are the hours. The hours were the same every day, so that was easy to understand. What wasn't easy to understand was the map. The map, because I had never been to this community. I had never physically been there. I was going based on what the community was telling me. And because I had not been there, I didn't have the right scope of questions to ask to really make sure that this map would make sense. So if you think, how is someone going to explain to someone else? Word of mouth. How does this service work? Where can you use it? The map was harder to understand. So in our second phase, we made the map very simple. You could say these 4 roads are the boundaries. Very easy. And it also aligns with what people in the community think. It aligns with where people in Leimert Park feel Leimert Park includes. So it's not just the village, but it's some other extended areas. We also had a grocery store that during the pandemic closed, and had to figure out which other grocery store nearby, which was not very nearby, which other one could we include. In the Rockaways, I was building on this experience, and we had a lot of community partners. This was, we assembled the community board ourselves, and this grant didn't require us to, but because I had the experience of using a community panel before, and how good it was to be able to work with local businesses and local nonprofits that really understood the problems. I came to this session proposing initially in the grant, we're going to have a community advisory council. Like that's, working in these communities, that is the best way to establish trust and the best way to get a global understanding, because you're building a landscape right there. Each of them have some different experience and different frameworks on the problem, and you get better feedback that way on the technology. So you could see here in the middle, this is a map. We had an interactive session. We didn't tell people where the program was going to go, or where we thought it was going to go. We asked them, where would you want to go in this map? We had it printed very large. We also had a large number of use cases. On the one to the right is a grid that says grocery store, bank, daycare, number of different ways that someone could use the service. This is really that customer discovery, finding out what someone might use the service for. And then we had a survey that kind of gauged at how much might this type of user use the service, who would be our super users in this area. And it really helped with this experience with the Clean Tech Incubator to understand I was an expert in my solution, and the community is not going to be an expert on your solution, but they're going to be an expert on how their community works and how people get around in their community. So I led it with more of a structure this time. And I also asked other questions about other types of users I knew were in other communities. For example, in this one, they thought, well, commuters would use the service. Maybe we could just have hours in the beginning of the day at the end of it. Then we could, have the service exist for longer. We don't have to use as much money for the middle of the day. And then I asked, do you have a lot of seniors in this community? We found that seniors tend to use this in the middle of the day. And then it sort of evolved. Now this program is going to be written into the grant to focus on seniors, because we also found through just asking that question and then looking at demographics, this is an aging community. There are a lot of retirees in this community, and a lot of the public housing in this community is focused on seniors and disabled, not commuters. So you have to lead a little bit with your expertise, but then also give space to listen afterwards. Next slide. So these are some key takeaways. I think this is our program in Leimert Park. We had on the left, the woman in the middle with the shirt, Stand With Ukraine. She was a member of the senior community, and she was invited to also speak at the press, the ribbon cutting event. And in this program, we had some very good partners as well. The city, as well as nonprofits that represented the senior community. And she was a representative, and she also spoke. And I think that she really framed this problem for that type of community very well. Movement is life. And she characterized it, it really gives them access to a lot of different things. And it's not just the essential things, but things that give meaning to life, visiting friends, or just engaging with the community. So if you go through this process, you can use the startup tools in the same sort of way, just orient it around achieving the sort of mission or a goal that the community or city has. You have to focus on the users and discover who are your customers, who is going to use the service, and what are their characteristics like. There's a very great recent report that was done by LA Metro and LA Department of Transportation on how women travel. And in that study, it found that most women will string multiple trips together. They are more likely to travel midday than men. They're more likely to have different types of commute schedules, not just a 9 to 5. And they are also more likely to be traveling with someone, like with a child. They're not as likely to be traveling alone. They are also majority users of public transportation, despite the fact that in Los Angeles, most of the service is focused on a 1950s concept of the work commute for an office worker. So really figuring out how people use and engage with the service that you already have is really important. Identify the right type of problems, not just a global problem, but get more specific. Right size your scope. You can't solve all of the problems. Identify any barriers to using your service and figure out what is the scope on fixing it, and if you can, under whatever program you're proposing. I think the language is really important. This is from my humanities background, but use the same language that the community uses to describe themselves, and note how they're using that language. Many of them will not describe themselves as a disadvantaged community. Maybe they're an underrepresented community, an underserved community. There may be a range of words that they're using. Work with trusted partners. Even if you're a business working with other businesses or working with cities, nonprofits are great trusted partners that you can really understand what these challenges are at a better level, because they regularly communicate with the communities that they serve and the people that they serve. And then start with a minimum viable product, a small piece of that, how you can scale. And this works if you're working on a feature, something to adjust about your service, or a completely new program. And this is not just for transportation either. These can globally work in other areas of clean tech. And then have a process for continuous improvement, a way to continually get feedback. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Or we can move into the breakout sessions, hear from your experiences on clean transportation and or community engagement.
Thanks, Alyssa. We can take a moment here if anyone has any questions they want to ask Alyssa. There also will be many times to debrief through the next half hour, so no rush. All right, well, we're going to start with our breakout room 1. The question is, do you have experience with community outreach? Have you attended any community outreach events? And how can we include more community members? Nice.
Great.
It sounds.
Welcome back, everyone. Woo. All right. How would it go? What did you all talk about? I would love to hear from people.
I had a really nice group. I was with Mabel and with Gina, and we talked about the items that were assigned to us, and specifically around gaining trust of community. So Mabel had some really interesting insights and approaches for how to do that. It was a perfect pairing. So that was a really great little session that we had, and it was very well set up. So thank you.
That's awesome. Mabel, would you mind sharing one of your insights? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I felt really lucky that I had such a good audience to bounce an idea that my company is taking and bringing to the environmental and energy space. So essentially, on the healthcare side, to get to communities, disadvantaged communities, they have a proven method, which is they use these groups of usually women called promotoras, promoters in Spanish. And they are armed with education and information on everything from childhood immunization to regular flu shots to now COVID, but other spectrums of information that support healthy communities. And they are recognized in the community and the go-to person. So can we now arm them with environmental safety and safeguard messaging, actions, clean energy actions and messaging, et cetera, and use that trusted pathway and trusted people to bring that message. And so that's something that I submitted to a conference in San Diego in September, and it was accepted. And so we're going to be talking about that. So I wanted to get some initial reactions off that idea.
That's awesome.
Mabel, I love that idea. It sort of goes along with something else that I saw that when this is a personal thing, but all the community partners have my cell phone number. So they call me, and depending on what types of community partners you're working with, particularly if it's a small business or a small nonprofit, email is not the best way to communicate. And they have my number. They feel like they feel very comfortable talking to me. But you also might end up with something that a program that's funded if the community really appreciates this program, and then as a result, they might not feel comfortable telling you when anything's wrong. So they might be more comfortable telling a nonprofit or a trusted community partner, maybe a promotora, what issues or what understandings are they missing. And then those community partners can also aggregate that feedback, and then they feel comfortable talking to you. And then you could also brainstorm with them how to address this, because you don't want to, and Gula had brought this up, when you're submitting for grants, you might be going up against companies that they're really just ticking boxes. How do we distinguish ourselves that we actually really care? And showing these different feedback loops, how you're going to be continually improving, and that you have this very specific person in the community that you're designing this program for. Mrs. Adams uses her push cart and walks 2 miles. And then you have a statistics that broadens that. Mrs. Adams is not the only one doing this. 60% of the community trips are for seniors using an iPhone or using a smart app. If we did this, think of how many more people we could reach. So you're both you're making it specific, this person, this program, this problem is bigger. And then you also are building in these ways to promote it, like what you're taking, Mabel, but also to then get trusted feedback back. So I think that's what I would just add, is also being able to get the feedback loop.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Super cool. one other thing that people talked about, and then we'll go into the other group. Well, you have a lot more opportunity to speak in the next breakout room session, which is on our doorstep here. What does equity mean to you? How can we make clean transportation programs and infrastructure more inclusive? All right, looks like we have everyone back here.
Woo, we were having one intense conversation in
yeah.
the breakout room, and I knew it was going to be a good breakout room, so that's why I went in that room. When you control the breakout rooms and where you go, you got a little power. So I just have to say that Gabriella, Mabel, and Alyssa and I, we were having a really good conversation. And I'm just excited to hear ideas come from the group, to people to be inspired to really make a difference in our communities. And this is what it's about, right? Like for me, it's about getting inspired, listening to our community members. We have people from Houston. We have people that were coming in from other places. And it's like exciting to me, not just in California. So, I mean, I just have to say, great conversation, Mabel, super great idea. Gabriella, we're excited to, have you coming in from Houston. Anybody else calling in from another state, by the way? Anyone else?
Cassandra's from Dallas.
Dallas, awesome.
Nice.
Barat's currently in Tennessee, I think.
Okay, Seattle, we got Sarah in Seattle, awesome. See, so I just had to say that, just the great breakout room, great conversation, just kind of piggybacked on Mabel's idea and just chatting about that, and what it's like to be in maybe somebody that comes from the disadvantaged community and what that feels like. And I do want to say, if anyone on this call is aware of anybody that is from the BIPOC community, we are wanting to give out memberships and laptops to people. Please share our post about our scholarship program. It is something that is extremely passionate for myself, because I myself was gifted my first ever laptop. And a lot of times people may not understand, like for people that come that don't have a lot of money, when we were in college, like for myself, the only way that I was able to pursue my degree was to sit in the school library and work on the school computers and work on the school internet, because I didn't have it at home. So this is something that is really, really important to us at WCS. So please share for our scholarship program, because it's something that we have worked really hard on, and we really want to bridge the gap of technology for these communities and really just amplifying them and giving them access to events like this. I mean, imagine having more people on this event and them. And I was like, oh, that's great to give somebody a membership, but what if they can't tap in? That's great. Kudos to us. But if they can't tap in, it does them no good. So we took it to the next level. And because, we're in the I'm in the circular economy, I had to get refurbished laptops for every new member. So that's our goal. And thank you for letting me have the mic, Caroline, by the way.
No worries. That was awesome, Sarah. I do hope you all had great conversations in your rooms and got to really dig into these topics. I want to stay true to our timeline and close out on time. So Cassandra, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the slide deck. Thank you. So really just want to remind everyone, next slide from here, Cassandra, please, that we do have upcoming events. You can find them online. You don't have to write these down, but they're there, and there's many, and exactly cool. The Warriors are on in 1 minute. So one more second here. The next slide. I want to thank all of our volunteers. We really couldn't do this without you. And one more slide. You can find us all over the place virtually, and hopefully in person at in-person events soon. Thank you all. Thank you, Alyssa, and go Warriors for those of you in the Bay Area. Take care.